have music in the world. That's what we need to celebrate.
Yeah,
So it's wonderful to meet you. Thank you for taking a minute out today. I appreciate
of
it.
course. Thanks for having me.
You bet. So before we get into the latest project, I want to know this first and foremost. How did you get through the pandemic? 5 years ago, the world was raging. Everything changed for all of us, especially musicians. How did you survive COVID-19 that time? And how has it reverberated either into this project or what you're doing in 2025?
Yeah, that's actually a super great question. So 5 years ago, I'm only 25 now, so I was only 20 when the pandemic happened, and I'm very fortunate that I have like a super good relationship with my parents. So
Yeah.
they just kind of let me stay there until things were better. And I was lucky enough to find a teaching job at a studio that was already like mostly on, or not mostly online, but was moving online. So they kind of were already transitioning in that way anyways. So I still had some teaching work, and I'm not at the studio anymore. But I left for various reasons, but I now I'm teaching on my own. But I was lucky to have a teaching job that was already transitioning to online, and I was lucky to have parents that I have a good relationship with. And so I kind of spent a lot of that time, not a lot of the ideas I wrote during that time didn't end up making it on the album. But Aguila was something that I wrote while I was just at home. It was actually the very first thing I wrote while I was staying with my parents during the pandemic. So,
So this is your debut album.
mhm.
That you know, I was thinking about the debut, especially when you're just breaking out. That's a big, huge, bold statement to get into the world. Was there any pressure? How does it feel? Kind of that collection of emotions that go into this.
Well, I mean, you said, oh, I won't ask about the next project, but I've been telling people making an album has been the most stressful thing I've ever done, and I already want to do it again. But yeah, there was a little bit of pressure. I think I've already sort of gone through the feeling like, oh, maybe my stuff isn't good enough, wah wah type,
Yeah.
sitting in a corner, huddled, like unsure about myself. I already kind of went through that because I went to music school. And I'm very fortunate to have found a bunch of people from, that I either went to school with or that I just know through my connections who are super stoked to play my stuff and like pump my tires basically. But I already kind of went through that because at school I'd like give people the music. They're like, why so many time signatures? Why this? And they just weren't super down with my sickness, as one might say.
Yeah.
Um, so um, I already kind of went through that phase of, oh man, maybe my stuff isn't good enough because I had a bunch of people like not telling me it was bad, but questioning if it was good.
Yeah.
And just the questioning of it if it's good makes you spiral. So then by the time I got to now, when I was actually releasing it, I kind of had already done all of that pre-mental work of, you know what? I'm enough. And I can support myself even if this album totally flops. So I'm gonna put it out in the world. I'm confident about the stuff. So hopefully other people hear that too. And even if they don't, that's okay. So I already kind of did all that pre-mental work, basically.
Yeah. So how did you land on the actual tunes that you put on here? Obviously, as we established, being a debut is a big deal. So, and this is going to be a big way of fans to understand your vibe and who you are. How did you land on this music?
Well, usually the way I compose is like I just kind of sit down when I feel inspiration. I just write my ideas down. I don't really I don't really like set aside time to compose like a lot of other people might. I just kind of sit down when I have inspiration. And usually when I have inspiration, it's like, I don't know, 20 bars of an idea at most. And then I'll just like throw it away into the folder of all the other composition ideas. And then I find ones that I like and I kind of stitch them together. My composition style is pretty, I would say hands off actually. But as for why I picked those ones, they were mostly just the ones that I was really drawn to or felt an emotional connection with. Um, I some of them I didn't even really know why I had like an emotional feeling for it. Like, for example, when I first wrote From My Shores to Yours, I felt like I was like, wow, is this too simple? Is this like not enough kind of thing? But I just felt an emotional connection to it, and now I validated like actually simple is also there's a lot of beauty to be found in simple.
Yeah.
So I validated that now because when you're younger, you're like, I need to show everything. I need to throw the kitchen sink into this
Uh-huh.
song, every song. But yeah, so they were just the ones that I felt the most emotional connection with. Um, yeah, and as for yeah, I'd say that's kind of my answer.
Yeah. So what are you hoping the listener gets from this album?
Uh, well, I've flavored a lot of it as kind of a concept album exploring, like musically exploring how I feel being like n- diaspora away from the Philippines, basically. That's a very unelegant way of wording it, but it's my own emotional interpretation of how I feel not being connected to my culture. And I think that comes across more obviously in songs like Oppo, where it's like, okay, there's actually a lyric that like states this. So my hope, at least partially, is that people who are in that situation of feeling like, oh, I don't have a huge connection with my culture, can find some emotional catharsis from listening to it and just hearing how I sonically interpret that within myself. So that's kind of my first thing. I guess in a more selfish way, a second thing would be like, I just hope people like my music.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's however people derive enjoyment from it, specifically if it's related to how they feel about like themselves and their culture and how they connect to their forebearers in that lens, then that would be like the most optimal listening experience, I guess. But of course, there isn't a wrong way to listen to it either. So I hope people enjoy it. I hope they get something. What I've been telling people is I hope people get something
Yeah.
out of it. And it doesn't have to be what I think as the composer. It's just something.
I dig it. So take me back to the beginnings. How did music become your life, and more specifically, jazz?
Oh, I love talking about myself with this question. So yeah, I actually didn't start music or practicing piano until I was 12. Depending on how snobby of a classical person you ask, that might be too late for in some people's opinion, to start. But I didn't start music till I was 12, mostly just because um, my family wasn't in like a super great financial position to do so. I think my mom always wanted to put me in piano, but then like the 2008 recession happened, and it was like, okay, well, we don't have the money for that right now. And at the time, I was like 8 or 9, so they just kind of waited until they were in a bit of a better financial position, and then they put me in music lessons because I had always shown a bit of interest in it. I actually started playing oboe in band first. So I almost was an oboe player. Thank God I did not do that because wow, that's a hard life.
Yeah.
So I started learning classical when I was about 12. And I went through RCM, which is like I don't know if you know what RCM is, but basically it's Canada's classical conservatory program.
Yeah.
Um, and so I started when I was 12 and I worked through up to level 10 by the time I was 18. And at that point, I was like, well, there's obviously still a lot to achieve with classical, but I feel like I have hit the point where my what I've learned supersedes what my brain is able to contain at this time in this genre. I need space away from it so that I can make room for new information. And that's when I was like, well, I started getting exposed to more jazz artists. So I was listening to Miles Davis, Sketches of Spain. I was listening to John Coltrane ballads, just like lots of classic jazz. And I just popped up in my YouTube feed one day as a 16, 17-year-old, and then boom, that was it. And I was just so interested in it because I was like, I don't understand what is happening, but I want to. So then when I turned 18 and I could go to school, I was like, well, what better way to learn jazz than to have someone actually tell me how to do it and embark on this harrowing career path that my parents don't, well, not that they didn't approve of it. They've been very friendly about it, but definitely some reservations at the beginning. So then I started going to music school for jazz. We have a university here, McEwen, that is very friendly about taking people who aren't jazz musicians but show, I guess, enough potential to learn how to do it. So they heard me do my scales and they're like, yeah, you're fine, get in here.
Yeah.
Uh, and then I learned what I know from that. And now I've been graduated for a little while. And so I kind of, yeah, I guess jazz was a way for me to expand my knowledge. Jazz is obviously my favorite because, I just had this strong response emotionally to it when I first heard it. But I I would say my what draws me more to jazz or just music genres or styles in general, even more so than just what draws me to jazz, is just I really like to feel like I don't want to feel, I guess, imperialistic in my knowledge. I don't want to be like classical is the best. You need to know classical. You need to know jazz. Blah blah blah. Um, but I do think it's important for me to have a mind of like I do need to feel like I want to learn more, whether it's Western European or like uh, Filipino music, Japanese music, Indian music. I just want to feel like I'm expanding beyond that, and jazz was just kind of the natural next step progression from where I started.
So, what was the first live jazz show you witnessed that blew you away, that made you think, I want to climb on that stage and do that one day?
Ooh, that's a good question. Uh, it, I would say mostly the YouTube videos were more what caused me to do that. I guess I would watch live, and they're not even people that are like super duper famous, but there's a German guy who was like a blues piano player named Lucas Sestak. I don't really listen much to him anymore, but I just saw how much fun he had on stage, and classical is kind of this, it's a little surly. Or at least in my perspective, I guess a lot of people can see that as freedom in their own way, but in the way I grew up, it was a little more surly. So I would see these live performances on YouTube and go, wow, they're actually having fun while they're doing that. And that was kind of a shocking concept of like, I can smile on stage.
Yeah.
I could I can laugh about making a mistake. And that drew me besides, just not knowing what was going on and having that hunger of like, I just need to know what's happening. It was also just this is a completely different culture of music where people are, seem to be having a pretty good laugh about making a mistake. Usually with classical, you make a mistake and then there's a bunch of YouTube comments being like, measure 36 was not the best interpretation of
Yeah.
measure 36 I've heard. Um, and so, but then, with jazz, it's like, oh, all the performers are laughing about it. The audience gets a little laugh out of it, whether they know what's going on or not. The comments are like, I really love how this person laughed at this thing. So yeah, those live performances on YouTube were probably what really made me want to do it even more so than seeing it live. Obviously, I've seen live shows since then,
Yeah.
and they've been greatly inspiring, but that is definitely the strongest emotional response I've had is just sitting in my room watching live performances,
Totally.
many of them in a row.
Yeah. 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 So, let me ask you this. What do you like the best about being a professional musician? What gets you up every day and motivates you to create and evolve?
Hmm. Um, Well, I worked a couple jobs before I was a musician. I worked as a host at a restaurant, which I did like, and I worked at a barista as a barista, which I also liked. Um, but I wouldn't say I had the best working environment at either of those jobs. And it never felt like entirely my fault when, for example, I don't know how to use the espresso machine and I was never trained to use the espresso machine. So why am I being told to use the espresso machine and then getting berated for not knowing how to use it? So I worked a couple jobs, and it always kind of felt like at those jobs, it was kind of like there was more. Maybe it's food service. I don't know. No, I shouldn't say that. That's too derivative of every single food service job. The food service were jobs I did that I did enjoy because I like customer service, ironically. It felt like there was a culture of it's okay to be rude to each other if it gets the job done. And I just don't really subscribe to that notion. feel like maybe in music there's a little bit of that where it's like, well, this person's a great musician, and I don't care if he's an ass, I guess. Um, but I don't like that. So part of what I really like about music is feeling like, oh, I can curate who I work with. I just like the people that I'm working with. We have like minds. Um, so part of it is just I've worked a bunch of other jobs I don't like, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, so that's part of it. The other part of it is, I guess I just like being a little more independent with my work. I like saying what my hours are. I don't feel overwhelmed like I did when I was working in a more, I guess, corporate or servicey job where it's like, oh man, I'm working here for 40 hours with, this person who just asked me why I like weird music because they don't like jazz.
Yeah.
Um, so being a little more independent and being able to curate who I work with and just picking people who lift me up as opposed to feeling like they're punching down at me, um, is really nice. It's really nice to feel like I'm not constantly overwhelmed with work that I just don't care about. Um, yeah, and who doesn't want to have work doing their art form? And I guess another to go off of the previous thing you said about like how'd you get through the pandemic? I've done enough mental, oops, my bad. I've done enough mental work to know or support myself through when I feel overwhelmed or feel like I'm getting burnt out on music work. Because I know there's a lot of musicians who struggle because when music becomes their job, they lose their passion for it. And so it's, I feel like having those strategies that re-motivate me on music also helps get me up and wants to do the work more and more.
So at the end of the day, everyone has a perception of you, family, friends, fans, everyone that you work with, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Oh gosh, was not expecting to be this existential this morning. Who am I? I think that has a lot of different answers. It really depends. I think when I've heard other people describe themselves, how they perceive themselves, they'll use, various superlatives for, you could describe yourself in 3 words kind of thing. And I could certainly do that too, but I think it also depends on the day. I think I can be, a very chill, laid back surfer guy sometimes, and then other times I'm this big ball of anxiety that is like huddled in a corner, like, oh, what do I do? Um, and yeah, other times I can be really sarcastic and maybe not that nice. And other times I try to make an effort to reach out to people and check in on them. So I, I guess I guess this will give you a pretty good idea of how I perceive myself, but I don't like to, if I don't like to perceive myself as being one note, then I try not to also perceive other people as that way too, I guess. But I don't also want to answer your question with a very open-ended, well, I just don't perceive myself anyway because that's that's diminutive.
Yeah.
Um, then I'll try and use 3 words. I think I'm pretty dry. Um, not in a bad way, kind of like, Office UK type thing where it's, I just have a dry sense of humor.
Yeah.
Um, I don't have a voice that modulates very much. It's very like heart monitor stopped type pitch, but lower.
Yeah.
So I see myself as someone who is very dry and enjoys dry comedy. Um, I I'll do things for the bit. So I'll be uh, I'll put it this way. When I did my album release party, I unironically put on the invitation, please be ready to read a prompt for a Survivor audition video. And people showed up and were surprised to see a prompt for a Survivor audition video on my TV that everyone had to read simultaneously.
Nice.
So I will definitely do things as a bit. I say what I mean, I guess is a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I maybe I'm a bit of a prankster in a way. Not in that I go out and intentionally ruin strangers' days by being a prankster, but um, I just like to be funny and goofy in
I
my
love
own
it.
little weird, dry way.
I love it. So if anyone wants to pick up the album, find out about any tour dates, anything else going on in your world, where's the best place to go?
My website probably. I update it hopefully most of the time. It just depends on the week.
Yeah.
But my website is Banks J Music, which is BANKS J Music .com.
Okay.
So that's where all my upcoming shows are. You can find a Bandcamp link to my Bandcamp. That would be the best way to support me and my music, would be
Yeah.
purchasing my music off Bandcamp. I have CDs and I will get vinyls. I should have realized how much longer it takes vinyls to
Yeah.
make than CDs, so I've been still sort of waiting for those. That's my own bad. I should have scheduled that better, but so I'll have vinyls and CDs available for order on my Bandcamp. And yeah, other than that, Instagram. My Instagram is at just underscore joshing around.
Okay.
And that's mostly where I'm active on social media. I I try not to use social media too much. So I only really post on there once every couple weeks, couple
Okay.
months. But I will always post about a show, at least on my story,
Yeah.
that's coming up. So if you follow me on Instagram, you can at least see on my story as well over there.
Right on.
The website, as long as it's updated, the website should be the best one.
Excellent. I will put that in the show notes. Joshua, it's been great to know you. Great to meet you. Thank you so much for talking about the album. Best of luck with it.
Yeah, and thank you for asking such very thoughtful
Yeah.
questions.